poetry session. I noticed there's a lot of poetry this year in different sessions. It's a very poetic Shavuot. Um, and I don't think that's a coincidence. And maybe what we'll talk about will lead us to maybe some revelations, pun intended, about why that is. Okay. Folks are still coming in, so I'll just
I think feel free to get started. I'll
you're
stop
monitoring the
sharing.
meeting. Great, great, great.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good, good, good. We're officially on. So welcome everyone. Chag Shavuot Sameach. On this time of Zman Matan Toratenu, and this time of the giving and really the receiving of Torah, it's an honor to once again be teaching in our shared um, incredible virtual Sinai here with Temple Israel and with so many teachers, and to know that we are joining from, in some cases, across even thousands of miles. Um, so standing at Sinai in the same way that the sages said, everybody was at Sinai, everybody, everyone who would ever be, every Jew by choice, by birth, we all were at Sinai. So, in the same way, everyone everywhere, it is all inclusive through space and through time that we stand together at Sinai and reenact receiving this great gift of Torah through our learning. So it's wonderful the expansiveness of offerings that are present with us during this Shavuot and that have often been, that have always been, as long as I've been connected with this offering. The offerings have always been very broad and also very deep. So I am honored to this time, though I've taught several other things before, and I recognize some of your names. Those of you who are not Temple Ohavei Shalom members, I recognize some names from past years as well. I should say I am the rabbi at Temple Ohavei Shalom in Brookline. If you're not sure which one that is, it's the dome. It's the big, beautiful dome on Beacon Street. So just down the road from Temple Israel, Boston. Okay, so without further ado, I thought that this time I would, and humbly use some of my own text that I have created, um, an excerpt from many of my own poems from the past 19 months during this incredibly difficult chapter for our people. And I thought that I would use these texts as a way of engaging with our experiences, past, present, and longings for the future. So I want to start with just a little bit of an interactive prompt. And I'm wondering if any of you here have ever used writing, whether poetry or otherwise, as a tool for being present to or processing pain or difficult emotions. Now, this may be it's a self-selecting group, right? Maybe you came here because that is something that you do, but maybe you came here because that's something that you're interested in doing. So I'm just curious, and you can put it into the chat. I was debating, we're not that large a group, but I think it might be best in the interest of time to have you just drop in the chat if any of you have used writing, poetry or otherwise, as a modality for being present to and or processing pain or difficult emotions. That's not everyone's modality, right? And you can, it's great. We're getting a bunch of yeses. Okay. Okay. So I see that Lori is more likely to read that. That's yes, reading poetry as a way of connecting with what we're feeling. Great. A lot of people who have written, and then people who've maybe just started writing. And then maybe, and I probably should have asked this as a prompt, so thank you, Lori. I think that reading poetry is something that can also help us give voice to and be present to emotions that otherwise feel like we can't quite grasp them or we can't quite express them. So, okay, good, good. Okay. Um, and I'm I should have thought of the asking the question about reading poetry because reading poetry during a time that was really, really difficult for me following the loss of my father many years ago was, I think, one of my ways in to discovering writing poetry to give voice to those kinds of experiences. So, my next question is, have you found it to be a way to find or to generate strength or hope? Have you found it to be a way to find or to generate strength and hope? And if so, how? Okay. Oh, reciting aloud. That's wonderful. Um, yeah, we're a pretty small group, and this one might be hard to get to in the chat. So let's just take a couple of comments. Rhoda, I see your hand. Go ahead.
So I lost my son a year and a half ago,
So sorry.
and I found that I have been writing poetry for a while, and I just found that I don't think it made me feel better, but it took away the pain in a way.
Hmm.
Putting it on paper was like a catharsis.
Thank you for sharing that. May the memory of your son be a blessing. I'm seeing some folks in the chat. Yeah. Lori, I know about your brother's book. Yeah. A book he wrote when each of your parents died. Yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of you who, oh, beautiful. I see that Shira said it's like creating a monument to the valued memories. Okay, so poetry around loss of a beloved seems like something that many people have connected to. Yeah, it lifts some grief. Okay. Were there any comments that would be helpful to say aloud? I'm just going to scan the room if there's anyone with a hand raised. Okay. All right. So this is just to get us warmed up and to think about this. I also want to just probably remind you, I think many of you might know this. Otherwise, it will be new. For you to know that the Hebrew word for poetry is shir, which is the same word as song. And just kind of leaving a question here in the room with us, how can both of these modalities, poetry and song, help us in a time like this? So, this is some food for thought as we delve into some texts that I'm going to share. And it's wonderful that many of you have some connection to a writing practice or not even a practice. I would say mine is not a practice. Actually, I'll start by just giving a little bit of background about me and poetry before we delve into the text in a moment. Um, I've written poetry ever since I was a child, but um, I remember that in some experiences that were quite traumatic that I had, especially with the death of my father in 1998, when I was 24, and it was a very sudden loss. And then just a few years later, I had a very direct experience on September 11th, living and working in New York and working in Lower Manhattan. I wrote a lot of poetry after that time. And I've written, it comes in bursts, and I don't have a practice. I don't have I'm going to write 20 minutes a day, or I'm going to write every morning or every night. The poems come when they come. And I would love to hear from some of you too as we go on. Feel free to drop comments in um, about your own experience. I feel that the poems find me. The words, the images will just come to me at times that I can't predict. And then so sometimes we know that that liminal space between wakefulness and sleep is a time when we're much more creative. We're much less likely to have those self judgments, right? And our brains really do work differently and more creatively. So many of my poems will be in that space, just as I'm trying to fall asleep, or maybe when I'm waking up. And I just get things down on paper when they come because I don't know when they're going to come again. So I really seize the moment, and it's pretty spontaneous. Um, and I'm a fan of sharing them. In this regard, I'm really not a perfectionist. I like to share them when they're raw. I like to say fresh out of the oven. Um, And I edit them later on, but sometimes I just let them be the way that they first came out. Okay, so that was all in the abstract. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen where I've chosen some various sources, except the one that I need is not here. So hold on one second. I've chosen a few poems for us to look at together. Feel free to drop any thoughts or questions in the chat as we move through. No, I would love to. I always wish we had more time in these sessions so we could be more interactive. But I do want to show you some poems that we can root ourselves in for this discussion. All right, so I'm going to share poems that were written at various points during this very, very painful chapter for our people. And the first one, spoiler alert, I don't want you guys to look at when I'm scrolling up here. Okay, this first one was written, first one I'm sharing tonight. I had many written in the year before this, but this poem I called Elegy, and it came to me the day that it was either the day or the day after we learned that Hirsch Goldberg Poland and the other five hostages who had survived captivity to that point in Gaza had been murdered, so close to being rescued. And this is a true story. The first line, I was looking for the chet on my Hebrew keyboard that I have on my phone as I was trying to jot down this poem. So I'm going to read it aloud and I'll try to scroll along as we go. Elegy, September 1st, 2024. I couldn't find the chet, the Hebrew letter, the beginning of life, on my keyboard that I was using as a life raft to float down. Sorry, I have to move my screen here. To float down the river of tears, reaching out to the others in their own rafts as we were carried down a rushing river of grief beyond imagining. Our cries and the crash of the water somehow each amplifying the other rather than drowning each other out. Before the news, before the river, I daydreamed, Rachel's hand cradling the newly born head of her son Hirsch. The power of the love in that new connection inhabits eternity, and no matter the cruelty, the heartless desecration of life and love, that power outlives us all. That power is inside the rushing river of the tears of Am Yisrael. It will carry us as it always has. We will reach tomorrow by reaching out from our life rafts, from our keyboards, from our cameras on our phones as we call to cradle each other's tear-stained faces. The dove will see a rainbow. There will be a day after this endless day of devastation that has lasted nearly 11 months, a Kaddish year. There will be a new world built on living waters, made of tears and love. There is a stillness at the center of the life force, the waters, a place where they are with us still, where we cradle them and comfort them, that their lives, their suffering, their deaths will not be in vain. From this place of stillness, we will row back out into the waters. We will find each other and carry each other into each next breath, even when breathing seems impossible. We will see our ancestors' reflections in the water that surrounds us and carries us. We will see in the rainbow the faces stolen from this world, and we will not break our promise to see the promise held within it, that a new world is possible, that out of utter devastation we can create, we can live again. So I'm going to invite just immediate resonances, questions, words, phrases, ideas, anything that you felt a connection to. And I'm going to look for raised hands in this case. So it can be something about the poem, about the process. Anyone?
Rabbi, would you
Yeah.
like me to allow people to unmute themselves?
Why don't we do that? Sure, that's great, Emma. Thank you.
All right, so feel free to, unmute yourself, raise your hand, put something in the chat, however it feels meaningful to you to participate.
Yeah, and then I'll try to it's hard when it doesn't all fit on one screen, but I will try to scroll up and down if you want to refer to something here.
Yes, there's a request from Ellen to scroll through the poem again.
Sure. To a particular place, Ellen?
No, I just want to take it in again.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I'll try to scroll a little bit slowly. I will also share these afterwards. Um, or actually, Emma, I shared with you the Google Doc.
Yep, I
Um,
can put a link in the chat at the
Why
end.
don't you do that if folks want to be able to follow along at their own pace and then look at it and then you'll have it
Oh,
afterwards. That's fine.
yep, I can put the link in right
Thank
now. Just
you.
give me two.
Yeah. Um, so I welcome any, I'm trying to get back to your faces, but there we are. Um, you'll have that. And of course, let's see, I see two notes in the chat. Okay, so the imagery of the rushing waters and the tears overwhelming, but then being the means of carrying on. Yeah, thank you, Lori. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, I don't really look back in with these kinds of eyes. I don't look back at the poem as a reader exactly because it just comes from within. And so it's really a gift to see that reflection. I didn't have the conscious thought, I'm going to write about water being tears and water being what carried us.
Um,
But yeah, go ahead.
no, sorry, I thought you were done with your thought. I didn't mean
No,
to cut
that's
you
it.
off.
Yeah.
I see your Rhoda has her hand up, and then Shmuel, I do see your comment in the chat, and I can read that after Rhoda shares her comment or question.
Thank you, Rhoda. Go ahead.
I just wondered, do you think about the form before you write it, or it just comes out?
No, I don't think about the form. It just
Okay.
comes out. And the thing is, I know that every poets have so many different styles and so many different kinds of processes. And I know those of you who do write poetry or who have begun using that as a modality for the last 19 months, I wonder what your process is as well. Um, Mine is a very, very immediate and like I said before, just very raw, and there's no outlining, there's no drafting, there's no thinking about the form. Thank you for the question. Shmuel, thank you for these words. You said the raw words support and help us to bear the unbearable like a life-saving raft. Thank you. Ellen, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. So I mean, what I'm doing is I'm picking up on the words that are also part of our liturgies, our other shirim. So I'm thinking of, the rushing waters immediately, Eli, Eli,
Mm-hmm.
that came to mind. That's what we sing in
Yes.
mourners services. You have the dove and the rainbow, and the dove with all its symbolism. We just had a session on Song of Songs and dove symbolism in Song of Songs. So I'm thinking it may not be part of your conscious process, but as someone engaging your words, I'm engaging them from from these other ritual contexts.
Thank you so much for saying that because that's something that I did want to address, and I'm really glad that you named it because I find that though the poems really come through me in a way, I find that, of course, I'm a rabbi, I'm a very engaged Jew, right? My vocabulary is so much rooted in liturgy, in Torah, right? And I find that those things just emerge organically. So I don't say like, oh, I'm going to use that image. I don't say ahead of time. And I wonder if any of you have had that experience where we discover that we each have vocabularies within us that we're not necessarily consciously aware of. And in fact, in all of my poems, I think all of them really during this time since October 7th, 2023, I have noticed that same thing. So again, it's coming through, and then I read back over and I feel that, okay, this idea, this image, this phrase comes from Torah in the broadest sense. So you mentioned Eli, Eli. Eli, Eli is actually a poem. It was written by Hannah Senesh during the Holocaust. She was very, very young. She was a resistance fighter, paratrooper, Hungarian. And I sing it in pretty much every funeral. And like you said, in mourning services, Mourn. So it's not exactly a prayer, but I think that poetry is prayer and prayer is poetry also. It's reaching for what is inexpressible in other forms. Um, so I thank you for highlighting that. And I wonder if anyone has any thoughts on prayer as poetry, poetry as prayer, and if there's anything else on that theme of our vocabulary, the well of ideas and images that we may carry unconsciously or consciously from our tradition. So I welcome any thoughts on that or anything else before going on to the next poem. So, and Emma, if you can help me, I'm sort of looking for hands.
Absolutely.
Can you let me know?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. I see Larry's hand, and Larry, I see you've unmuted yourself, so feel free to share.
Thank you,
Chag
Larry.
Sameach, Rabbi, and thank you for sharing this with us. The poem hit me, and you've presented this poem before to us at Ohave Shalom, but it hit me once again as a gut punch, and yet it ends with a note of hope. And I'm reminded of the volume that I think you shared with us, in which we commend to others, Choosing Hope by David Arno here, that when all is said and done, it all has to be about hope. Our religion is about hope. And just responding to your last remark about prayer and poetry, I think this is all communing with God. We do this in various forms. We do this through meditation. We do this through prayer. We do this walking in nature. Poetry is another form. It all has that root that one way or another we need to connect to a higher being here to make some sense of the world.
Thank you, Larry. And I'll say that my own experience of writing poetry feels very much like a connection with the divine, and more so than in traditional prayer modalities. Although I will say in singing prayer, and again, shir, song and poem, same word, in singing and in writing, I find that connection to be strengthened and to be very vivid. And I would love to hear if that's the experience of any of you as well. I'll welcome any more comments or questions about this poem in the chat, and I'm going to take us to another one. This one was written when we were reading Parashat Devarim, the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy, and I honestly can't remember if I wrote it for Parshat Devarim in 2023 or 2024, but it is here, and there's a strange page break here. But this one is very consciously rooted in a very particular part of Torah, where I actually was, unlike what I said about the last poem, where those images and that vocabulary of Judaism was emerging organically. And here we came to Parshat Devarim, and I was thinking about a Devar Torah, and this poem came very intentionally for the parasha. Like Moses, we are heavy of tongue, and we don't want this role. Please, please choose someone else. We're slow of speech, And like Moses, through the slow march of history, we are tasked with living and telling and creating the story. Living to tell the story, living by telling the story, living with the story woven into our bones. These words are like manna. They come to sustain us, but we must digest and create from them our own story. Each footstep on the journey, a letter of Torah. We spin a tale like the silk used in the Mishkan. We spin a tale that becomes a scroll that goes on and on. Lishanot, to change, but also to repeat. We repeat the stories by letting them live in and through us as we live in them. And so the stories change each time we take them into our mouths. With each spin of the Atzei Chaim, each column of the scroll, not a map, but a question, an invitation that is also a demand. Chai Bahem. Live in me, let me live in you. Live through me by making of me something new. Each step in your wilderness, know that these words are yours for safekeeping and for keeping you safe. Know that these words live and breathe, and therefore they change. Create Torah with each step you take. Make wisdom out of every question. Know that even in times when no words seem enough, these are yours to make alive in every time and every place, to help you live. Even when fires burn and the heavy cloud of fear rests upon your hearts, hold these words, make them yours. Hold fast to the Atzei Chaim, those trees of life. Hold each other. In and through these living words, may you choose life again and again. And you see there's footnotes because I like to make these, when I put them in the world, I try to make them accessible for a wide audience. So those are little explanations of like Chai Bahem, live in, live through these words, and other phrases like that I've footnoted. So I know those aren't visible right now. Let me know if you'd like to see them. Any immediate responses, questions? These are not light reading. I recognize that. And it's a lot to share more than one in this session. But I wanted to give just a little sampling of different forms of writing in a way that, for me, has been a way of being present to and lifting, as somebody said earlier, that doesn't take the grief away, but something is lifted. And something is shared. And maybe that's because we are connecting with the divine and we're giving some to the divine to hold. I welcome any responses to what I just said about the act of writing or to the poem. You can go ahead and unmute yourself or place anything you'd like in the chat.
Shmuel, feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, somebody must be the first one. Okay. First of all, it inspires me. I read it, I let the word rush by me, go by me, and I'm inspired to other thinking. First, thank you because your songs are giving us a glimpse in your soul. You are giving up part of your soul in these songs, and it's wonderful. Usually, when we talk, we don't give our souls. Our tongue gives something out, but not our soul. And I think I thought immediately about our Amidah, Tfilat Amidah, the standing ovation, where we speak with God, and we are quiet, we are silent. We don't speak with our words, not with tongue, but with our heart. And in the Amidah, also when we use the text, the words that we are 1,000 years pray, each day and each moment, this prayer get a new interpretation from our mind, from our daily life, from our experience, and they mean to us new. And we cannot share it actually, maybe with songs, but we cannot share it. But our soul, in our quiet prayer to our creators, we are, as to say, stepping forwards, making from this base prayer our soul and our life. That's more or less my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shmuel. I really appreciate that. And your comment about sharing my soul, I think, is very relevant to my understanding of what it is to receive Torah and to receive Torah in an ongoing way. As you said, in each act of prayer, each time we come to the tefillah, the amidah, or any words of our prayer, we are not the same each time we encounter them. We are giving voice to these ancient words in the present moment. And that is a dialogue between our souls and these ancient words. And I think that the revelation of Torah, I think each human being and each neshama, each soul, is absolutely a Torah, is its completely unique story that is meant to be known and encountered. And when we can be brave enough to, some of us are wired to more easily do that. So, full disclosure, this comes easily to me, and some people not at all. So, I'm not saying that I've worked so hard and I'm so brave. It's just sort of part of my nature. To be in this way, to be an open book, an open scroll in some ways. And I think it's very important on this holiday to remind ourselves of the gift we can give to others when we bring our full neshama, all the broken parts or the parts that we label as broken or bad, and all of the gifts that we have to bring. I think that we are each of us necessary. That's why we learn that each of us stood at Sinai, each of us heard in exactly the way that we could hear and take in the revelation of Torah. And now it's up to us to share the Torah as it's been encountered and digested by us. So it is a soul sharing. And I really appreciate the language for that, Shmuel. And I love that Shmuel, as clearly a native Hebrew speaker, is saying songs, right? Songs, because songs and poems, it's the same word in Hebrew. Okay, any other questions, comments, or responses?
This is Cher. I was going to
Yeah.
say one or two things. I'm looking at the poem on my screen, so I'm not looking at you right now. I appreciated this starting out with Moshe Moses, because I personally, I know he's elevated in our tradition, but I find him the most he's one can identify with him very much. So I kind of appreciated that it started there. And the other was near the end. Oops.
I can
Hold
scroll.
fast. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Hold
Near the
fast
end.
to the hold fast to the Atzei Chaim, those trees of life, hold each other. And I just wanted to comment on that it kind of stood out to me that to love each other is the path.
Yeah.
That's Eitz Chaim.
Yes,
But
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
thank
Any
you.
others? Yeah, thank you.
I have a comment, a question. Sorry. Hi.
Yeah, go ahead,
I'm not
Jocelyn.
Jocelyn.
Yeah.
Okay, comes as Jocelyn.
Mhm.
But this is the further conversation. Of course, it's all beautiful, your poetry.
Thank you.
But I get inspired a lot when I'm sitting and praying in shul. But I also come from the tradition to not really write in shul. And then sometimes I try to remember, I forget. Does this make sense what I'm asking? Like
Mm-hmm.
to be able to remember what I'm being inspired by
Yeah.
prayer. but I'm not having the moment to journal it at that time. I don't know if that happened to you even as a rabbi, or
That
if you
has,
can
yeah,
talk about that experience, about that part of
absolutely.
creating.
Right, right. That can be frustrating when something comes to you and you're not in a circumstance where you can jot it down. And I would say to really try to integrate it, um, maybe, I mean, what comes to mind is we can better remember and integrate things. If maybe you're sitting there in prayer and something inspires you and you do some mindful breathing, just breathing in and out on the words, or pick one word or phrase or idea that will be the reminder word or phrase or idea, and almost combine it with your breath, if that makes sense, to sort of make it an integrated experience. Feel it in your body. And then
Yeah,
when you,
that's great.
yeah, and then
Diana.
later on, but I can relate to that very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had many of those moments. And then, you might find I've had this experience too, where that happens. And then I say, oh no, I forgot I had something came to me. I can't remember it anymore. And then it will come back in that
That's right.
normal period, right? Between sleep and wakefulness, or maybe when your mind is calm, right? Or you're taking a walk, or so.
I don't know if
Yeah,
anyone else had the experience, but then sometimes maybe it doesn't come back and I even forget. But when I come to the Torah portion or a Psalm 6 months later, a year later, it comes back to me
yeah,
again.
right.
But I don't know how to explain that. It's almost like time folds back, as you say, the Torah is in us. And then it might be an inspiration. And then all of a sudden that day I can journal it.
That's
But it
beautiful.
could be a year later or 6 months later. I don't, you know,
That's so
when I
beautiful.
hear
And
it secondly.
it's very resonant, I think, with this poem that, we go through again and again the same words, the same stories, and there is incredible power. It's like they get the words, ideas, the themes get somehow engraved in our souls, even though we may not be consciously aware. And then when we encounter it again with who we are in that moment, that year, that day, right? It allows us to get to a deeper layer of who we were. Like there's a way in which when we come to something again and again, it brings together the layers of who we've been, all the other times we've seen it. This could be true of the Passover Haggadah, or any kind of text or blessing or any ritual that you do again and again, because not all of us are hearing words of Torah or engaging with words of the actual Torah scroll every Shabbat, every year. But this can be true. I think there's such an incredible magic to returning to something that is ancient, that comes back to us and we come back to it again and again. And like you said, that's so powerful that you're reminded of an insight you had the year before. And to trust that when you have that insight, that connection, right, that it's in you, even if it's escaped your consciousness, it's there and it will reemerge. So there's a lot of beautiful invitation and opportunity, and I think, in coming back to our texts again and again. So, again, by making of me something new, this is sort of, you could say this is God talking. This is God talking in this poem, right? That live in these words. The words are also the speaker of the words, which is the divine, and we're sort of making something new of the words and making something new of our connection with the transcendent each time we encounter them. And they're also words they both are very ancient and very new all at once. So they're for safekeeping, they're for keeping us safe, but also they live and breathe. They're not static, they change. So imagining the wilderness journey and the journey of our lives right now, or at any moment in history, but this was especially written for an incredibly painful moment of Jewish history. With each step we take in this journey, even at times when no words seem enough. But these are ours. These are our inheritance to make alive. in every time and place and to help us live. I'm noticing upon reading this that there's an inspiration that I'm not sure I was even aware of when I wrote it. I don't know if any of you know the poet, know of the poet Stanley Kunitz. If you don't, I highly suggest you Google his name, Kunitz, and his poem, The Layers, which Ohave Shalom folks have heard me, thank you, Emma, have heard me share this more than once. He was interviewed many years ago. He died at the age of 100 or 101. And when he was quite old, maybe 20 years ago, I don't remember exactly, he was interviewed for public radio, and there's an interview you can find online. But some of his words and phrases I see here now that I'm looking at it again with all of you. This line, even when fires burn and the heavy cloud of fear rests upon your hearts. There's a resonance here with Torah, with a cloud of the divine resting upon the tabernacle. And there's also a resonance here, I'm realizing only now, consciously, with this Stanley Kunitz poem that I really love. Okay, I can't see right now if anyone else wanted to say anything or ask anything. And yes, I recognize this is something to be digested, just like Torah, not in just one reading. So please feel free to take that link that's in the chat to the Google Doc. And I hope to be publishing a book of poetry that's in process now. And so stay tuned, because I hope that in the not too distant future, there will be a way to engage with these and other poems in a less rushed and a way that is easier to digest them. So anyone else for this poem? Any other thoughts or comments? So again, just giving you kind of a taste of what emerges from using this. For me, it's just a natural modality, and it's not for everyone, but it's clear from when I first asked in the chat that many of you have turned to either writing or reading of poetry to give voice to what is otherwise feels impossible to express. And I really do feel, and I think some of you have expressed this too, that that there is a lifting, that there is a lifting of some of the heaviness when we read words of poetry or write them. So I do have one more poem. And I think, Emma, do we have 5 more minutes before we take a break?
Yep, you've got 5 more minutes.
Great. So this is very, very new. I just wrote it in the last few days. And this came just very fast and furious. I just had an image come to mind that is very much resonant with some of what we've talked about holding grief and pain together and sharing it with each other, sharing it with the divine. So an image came to me that was kind of inspired by the whole book of Leviticus that we just recently finished, right? In all the sacrificial descriptions and laws, and there's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of burning of things, of sacrifices. So this image was coming to mind just as I was falling asleep, and I was also thinking about a real life experience that I had just had. When I visited a healer, like a craniosacral massage therapist who also does other kind of energy healing. And this healer was not Jewish, and I think it's relevant here, and you'll see why, okay? So here's the poem for our last couple minutes. To be a Jew. The healer told me, say this at the end of every day, at the end of each day. I give my body permission to release the grief that is not mine to hold. So I brought this offering to the sanctuary that dwells in the memory of cells and soul. I said with open palms, heart cracked wide, Here, take this. But like wisps of smoke drifting upwards from the ancient altar, a trail made of God's breath came down and touched my brow. This is yours, your inheritance, from a time that reaches past memories, past time. It is yours, but like this trail of smoke and whisper, suspended in its mutual, eternal movement, it connects us forever, drawing us close, drawing you close to each other. A lifeline made of grief, made of longing, made of love. So I don't have time to read the whole thing again, but I want to just highlight. The healer says you can release the grief, right? That is not yours. But I hear this tradition calling out and saying, this is yours, but you're not holding it alone. And I think this brings us back to the first poem that I shared, reaching out to each other on the rafts. I would love any quick reflections, responses, questions. I'm going to put my email address in the chat because it always feels like we don't have enough time, and I love connecting to people. So if you had questions or comments or anything at all you'd want to share that we didn't get to, there's my email. But of course, you can just find me, Temple Ohave Shalom. Any last thoughts before we wrap up? I want to thank you for indulging me and sharing too many of my poems at once, but I was eager to give a sampling of this modality and the way that I have found it in a time where healing and relief feels hard to come by, that I feel these putting things to words in a form that we're without judgment, just write down. I encourage every one of you. You don't need to think you're a poet. Just write. Put pen to paper without any judgment. And I hope and pray that through that or any modality that feels right to you, that your soul will be relieved of some of what we're all carrying, and that you'll know that it is shared. And open your soul to others, because everyone is hurting, whether it's because of this particular circumstance of the Jewish people or anything at all in this world, right? We can share our pain with each other and therefore really hold each other. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I know that was really meaningful to everyone, as they're saying in the chat. Next up in this room at 9 p.m. will be What Happens After We Die with Rabbi Elaine Zecker and Rabbi Andrew Oberstein. So stay tuned for the continued learning, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Emma.
Yasher Koach, Rabbi.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, Chicago.
As you were reading this, Rabbi, I was
Shalom.
saying to myself, if anybody were to come up to you and say, Rabbi, why do we need a minyan for the Mourner's Kaddish? You could pull out this poem and read this poem.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful, Larry.
That's
Thank you.
immediately what I thought of here. Just
Wow. Thank you.
Blessings, everybody.
Blessings.
Emma, if we stay on here, do we automatically go into the next one?
Yep, that's correct. Just stay in the Zoom room to keep learning.
Just continuous revelation of Torah.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Okay,